Hi, and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's Game of Thrones character profile and analysis for Lyanna Mormont. In this video, I take a look at the character of Lyanna Mormont as portrayed in the Game of Thrones HBO show and analyze why this character has become so popular and speculate on where her storyline may go from here. So I have to start with a spoiler warning for Game of Thrones up to the end of Season 6. If you haven't seen up to this point, you may not want to watch this video, otherwise some things may be spoiled for you. However, this video will not contain any spoilers for the upcoming Season 7, so you will be safe from those kinds of spoilers. So, Lyanna Mormont is presented in the show as the head of House Mormont, which is quite different from the novels, as there are several others ahead of her in the line of succession. However, it appears the show decided to simplify things in order to make this 10-year-old girl the head of one of the great houses of the North. Not just any house, though, one that the audience of the show is already familiar with, as we had two prominent characters who were of this house, G.R. Mormont, who was the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch and Jon Snow's mentor in the first 3 seasons, and Jorah Mormont, who served as Daenerys Targaryen's most trusted aide throughout most of the series. So it made sense for the show in Season 6 to focus on a house to which the audience was already familiar with, even though, as we soon learn in the grand scheme of things, House Mormont is not a very powerful house, as they only had 62 fighting men to offer up to the Starks to take on the Boltons. We also saw from the Battle of Bastards that they weren't the only Northern house that agreed to join the Starks against the Boltons. Many of these other houses were even able to offer more fighting men, but the Mormonts were the house that the show mainly focused on. And the character they chose to represent House Mormont was Lyanna Mormont, a 10-year-old girl. Now, the first mention we had of this character was back at the start of Season 5, where Stannis was trying to gain the support of the Northern Lords to take on the Boltons with no luck. And he read for Jon the letter she wrote him, which read, "We know no king but the king in the north, whose name is Stark." That was a fun little scene that was well received, of Stannis getting turned down by a 10-year-old girl, and that stubbornness represented the Northern House's devotion to House Stark. So then it was fitting that when House Stark was trying to reclaim their place at Winterfell, that Lyanna Mormont would be one of those houses that they visited. So in episode 7 of Season 6, there was a storyline of Jon, Sansa, and Davos traveling the north to make alliances to take on the Boltons. We got a scene of Jon convincing the wildlings, or the free folk as they prefer to be called, to help them in their fight. And later we got a scene of them asking House Glover for help, who turned them down. Lord Glover no doubt was meant to represent all of the houses that turned down the Starks' call for aid, whereas the Mormonts were there to represent all the houses that accepted their call. So it was fitting that it would be a small house without many fighting men to represent this side, as the purpose was to show how weak the Stark side was. However, the scene where they asked Lyanna Mormont for help quickly became a very popular scene, one in which everyone was talking about, and Lyanna Mormont quickly became a fan favorite character. She would go on to make appearances in the Battle of Bastards, although she had very few lines, and she would also appear in a scene in the finale where Jon was pronounced king. So all in all, she didn't appear in the show that much. However, she was one character that people were buzzing about the most after Season 6 had finished, and pronouncing her one of the best and most badass characters in the show after only a few appearances. One of the biggest reasons why this may be is that we have a 10-year-old girl, but one who is forced to become the head of her house and therefore must act as a grown woman. And with the letter she wrote to Stannis, it would seem like her joining with the Starks would be a foregone conclusion. In fact, Jon does bring up the letter. However, she isn't as easy to win over as that, as she challenges Jon and Sansa, even making remarks about how she doesn't know if Sansa is a Lannister or a Bolton. In fact, she pretty much makes Jon and Sansa dumbfounded on how best to win her over. Part of the reason why is they started off by treating her like a little girl. It wasn't until Davos stepped in and reasoned with her as an adult that they managed to win her over. And that's perhaps part of the reason on why she became such a fan favorite, because she was able to put the likes of Sansa and Jon in their place, and she had a no holds barred badass attitude, despite her age and size, and despite how little her army was. And there was a dynamic to this character too, because she did constantly ask her advisors for help and clarification, so it shows that she wasn't so arrogant as to think she could do everything herself, and she knew that she needed help with those with more experience. But when it was time to make her decision, she silenced them and made the decision that she thought was best, like a true leader would do. And audiences warmed up to her, even more in the season 6 finale, where she was in fact the one who first proposed that Jon be made king in the north. When all the other lords were squabbling amongst themselves, it was Lady Mormont who broke the silence and proposed they rally around Jon Snow by repeating the words she wrote to Stannis: "We know no king but the king in the north, whose name is Stark." She also shames the other northern lords who refused to aid Jon Snow in their fight against the Boltons, and this was in fact very effective in getting the other lords to realize their mistake and attempt to atone for it by pronouncing Jon king of the north. So it could be said that it was Lyanna Mormont who made Jon king in the north, and this again makes her a very noteworthy character, that she was able to shame grown men twice her size who commanded much larger and more prestigious houses into doing what she wanted them to do. And also that she was at first opposed to Jon and Sansa, but once she was won over, she became their most valuable ally. That speaks a lot of her character. Another reason cited for why this character quickly became a fan favorite is how excellent the actor Bella Ramsey, who portrayed her, did a job of portraying her. This 11-year-old girl was able to project the power that put grown men to shame while still relaying an undercurrent of being a young girl. Was extremely effective and extremely well done. The funny thing though is that apparently, I've read this somewhere, that her parents won't even let the young actress watch the show that she is in, as they feel she is still too young. And yet she still manages to do such a great job, and this is likely to be a huge boost for her acting career. So the question now is, where does her character go from here? I don't think that the showrunners knew exactly how much her character would take off and how big of a fan favorite that she'd become. Certainly not while they were writing season 6, which was completed far before it aired. But now that they do know, how will they react to her new popularity, or will they react at all? Now, there's been a lot of joking online about Lyanna Mormont being killed off because of her popularity, because the show is known for killing off characters that you care most about. I myself even made a prediction that Lyanna Mormont would die in season 7 in my Who's Going to Die prediction video. But in that video, I was just trying to come up with as many guesses as I could on who might die, because the more I guessed, the more I was likely to get right. But when it comes down to it, I don't really think that she will die, and I do think she will be more prominent in Season 7 than she was in Season 6. And the reason for that is actually the showrunners tend to react more positively when a character is well liked by the fans. For example, Tyrion barely appeared in Season 1, but by the end of it, he was far and away the fan favorite pick, so he appeared more in later seasons. In fact, in Season 2 and 3, it was noted that he was receiving far more screen time than any of the other characters, regardless of how important or prominent his storyline was to the overall story. And the later seasons that followed, they also focused a lot more on him than his storyline somewhat warranted. So I do think that the showrunners do take fan reaction into account and try to give them what they want. So I do think we will see a lot more of Lyanna Mormont in Season 7, and I believe she will continue to be a trusted advisor to the Starks in Winterfell, and in fact will be the go-to Northern Lord to represent all of the Northern Lords when they need to have one in the show, and perhaps even a significant character in Winterfell's storyline overall. Because I do believe the show could use one, and she certainly has the popularity to warrant it. But whether or not this means she will be killed off, I'm still uncertain about that, because the flip side of the coin is the more you care about a character, the more affected you would be if that character dies. And the show does have a history of killing off characters in order to have an emotional impact, arguably even more so than the books. So killing her character could be a way to accomplish that, but I somewhat suspect that the reaction would be too negative rather than emotionally impactful. So if they were to do that, they'd have to be very careful about it and do it in such a way that gave it great meaning to the story overall. But despite of what I said in my predictions video, if I would have to place a bet, I'd say that the chances of her surviving Season 7 are greater than the chances of her being killed. Either way, I think we'll be seeing a lot more of this character in Season 7, and I absolutely cannot wait for that. So that's it for my character analysis video on Lyanna Mormont. Be sure to check out my channel for more Game of Thrones content, and be sure to vote for which episode you'd like to see me and 4 other YouTubers do live commentary for. Details are in an announcement video that I'll put in a link to in the description below, so you can check that out. Also, check out my channel for many more videos on other shows like Star Trek, The Leftovers, Better Call Saul, The 100, and more. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that. And thanks a lot for watching.